Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the quietest, most relentless countdown clocks in modern history. The unwritten deadline that gave a 1950s American woman until roughly the age of 25 to find a husband, or else. Not with a law, not with a court, not with anyone you could actually argue with. No, with bacon delivered as a threat at the breakfast table, a magazine listing 129 ways to land a man, and a wooden box at the foot of the bed slowly filling with towels for a marriage that did not yet exist. Before we begin, it genuinely means a lot that you're here, and if these sleepy histories help you drift off, a quiet like and a subscribe keep this whole channel going. If the mood strikes, say hello from wherever you happen to be lying awake right now, and confess whether your own grandmother ever bragged about earning what she called a Mrs. degree. No judgment. Well, a little. Get comfortable, pull the blanket up, and maybe slide any bridal catalogues out of arm's reach, because they can sense hesitation. Ever lain awake doing panicked arithmetic about your own age before you'd even had coffee? Why was a perfectly good college degree treated as the backup plan to a fraternity pin? What exactly was a man supposed to do with a lasso on a busy street corner? Why did a psychiatrist get rich diagnosing single women as broken? How did a diamond become mandatory because of one sentence written by an ad man? Did anyone, anywhere, ever just want to be left alone with a sandwich? Congratulations. You have just blinked awake in a quiet American suburb, autumn of 1954. You are 24. There is a cedar chest at the foot of your bed, a mother at the stove with engagement news, and a calendar on the wall doing something that feels a lot like staring. Good luck. You wake up in 1954, and the first thing you do, before coffee, before the radio, before you have even located both slippers, is arithmetic. You are 24. You will be 25 in the fall. You do this calculation the way other people check the weather, automatically and with a faint sense of dread, because somewhere a long time ago you absorbed the idea that 25 is a wall, and you are walking toward it at the speed of one birthday a year. The ceiling has a water stain shaped vaguely like Ohio. You stare at it and you count. The arithmetic is always the same, which is the exhausting part. It never improves. You are not solving for anything. You are simply confirming, daily, that time continues to pass in the agreed-upon direction, and that you are still, by the standards of everyone you have ever met, alarmingly unclaimed. The alarm clock on the nightstand is a squat brass tyrant with two bells on top, and it does not merely tell you the time. It tells you the time in the larger sense, the geological sense, the sense in which you are a woman of 24 with no ring and a finite supply of mornings. It ticks like it knows something. You would like to throw it across the room, but it cost money, and money is precisely the resource you are not supposed to be managing on your own. You lie there and you run the inventory. The girls you graduated with, married, engaged, married, expecting, and one mysterious case named Dorothy who moved to the city and stopped writing. Spoken of now in the hushed tone reserved for the dead and the divorced, you are the holdout. You are the one the others pray for at night, briefly, between thanking God for their own husbands. Down the hall you can hear your younger sister Carol already up and humming, because Carol is 19 and recently pinned and therefore lives in a different country, a sunlit one, with no border control and excellent weather. Carol does not do the morning math. Carol does not have to. Carol floats through the upstairs hallway, trailing the specific confidence of a person whose future has been pre-approved, and she pats your door twice on her way past, gently, the way you pat a horse that came in last. The radio downstairs clicks on, and a man with a velvet voice begins selling soap to housewives, meaning the women who solved this exact equation in time. Every advertisement is addressed to the married. The economy is a party you have been invited to attend only as a +1 you do not yet have. The soap is for her hands. The casserole dish is for her oven. The diamond, somewhere in a velvet box in a store downtown, is being kept warm for someone, and the someone is supposed to be you, and you are running out of warmth. You finally locate the second slipper. It was under the bed, next to the cedar chest which sits at the foot of the bed radiating a quiet, patient and faintly smug expectation, a piece of furniture that has read your file. You do not look at it yet. You are not ready for that conversation. The math, if you let it, will eat the whole morning. 24 now. 25 in the fall. After 25, the vocabulary changes. You have noticed. From single, which is a status, to unmarried, which is a verdict, and then eventually to spinster, which is barely even a word anymore so much as a closing door. You have until the fall. You have, by the only calendar that counts in this house, one season left to become someone else's beginning. You get up. The floor is cold. The day, like every day, has homework, and the homework is your entire life. You go downstairs because the bacon is calling, and the bacon, you already know, has opinions. You come downstairs and your mother is already at the stove, and she has news, which is to say she has the same news she had yesterday delivered in a fresh outfit. Somebody you went to high school with got engaged. Your mother mentions this while turning bacon, lightly, the way a person mentions that the roof is on fire. You butter your toast. She lets the silence work. The toast is the only thing in this kitchen not currently being evaluated for marriageability, and even the toast feels watched. Your mother does not nag. Nagging is for amateurs. Your mother practices a refined, patient, and lethal form of pressure that involves saying almost nothing while arranging her entire body into a question mark aimed at your left hand. She turns the bacon. She lets the news sit in the air like steam. The engaged girl from your graduating class is named Patricia, and Patricia, your mother notes, was never the brightest, which is meant as encouragement and lands as a small knife. You reach for the coffee. The percolator on the counter gurgles to itself, smug, having performed its one job successfully, which is more than can be said for you. The kitchen smells of bacon grease and lemon floor wax and the faint metallic tang of maternal disappointment, which has its own scent now, you are fairly sure, somewhere between vinegar and church. Patricia, your mother says again, is registering for China. Registering for China is the 1954 equivalent of announcing your engagement on a billboard over the freeway, except slower and involving more gravy boats. You say that is nice. You mean it the way you mean it when the dentist says this will only pinch. She slides a plate in front of you. The eggs are arranged with the precision of a woman who has channeled every unspoken thing into the placement of food. There is a whole conversation happening on this plate. The bacon is laid out in a fan. The fan says, "I did this for you, and one day you will do it for a man, assuming you can locate one before the warranty on your youth expires." Your father, behind his newspaper, contributes nothing, reading about the Dodgers, who at least have a season that ends in something other than a wedding. Aunt Marion arrives, because Aunt Marion has a sixth sense for moments of maximum tension and a standing reservation at all of them. She immediately asks whether you are still seeing that Donald in the tone of a woman checking on the progress of a slow casserole. You say yes. She asks, with surgical sweetness, whether Donald has said anything yet. Everyone in the kitchen knows what anything means. Anything means a ring. There is only one anything. You butter your toast. The toast, at least, asks nothing of you. The toast does not want to know your intentions. The toast has no opinion about Donald, no aunt, no china pattern, and in this kitchen full of people quietly evaluating your romantic logistics, the toast has become your closest friend and most discreet confidant. Your mother sits down across from you, finally, and softens, and the softening is somehow worse than the pressure. She tells you she only wants you settled. She says it the way you would say you only want someone to not be standing in traffic. To her, 24 and unmarried is traffic. To her, you are standing in the road with the light changing, and she cannot understand why you will not simply step toward the nice man with the car. You finish the eggs. You compliment the bacon, which earns you a flicker of genuine warmth, and for a moment the war pauses, and it is just a mother and a daughter in a yellow kitchen, both of them frightened of the same calendar, neither admitting it. Then Patricia and her china rise again like the tide, and you stand, and you carry your plate to the sink, and you go to face the rest of a day whose entire curriculum is the same single question, asked by everyone, owned by no one. You own a large wooden box that smells aggressively of cedar, and you have been filling it since you were 16 with the household goods of a marriage that has not yet been arranged to a man who has not yet been met. It is called a hope chest, which is an optimistic name for a piece of furniture that is mostly anxiety with hinges. Inside are pillowcases you embroidered, tablecloths still in tissue paper, and a set of good towels you are forbidden from using. You open it. The cedar exhales. You lift the lid and the smell hits first, that sharp, sweet, resinous cedar that furniture companies cultivate on purpose, partly to keep moths out and partly because it smells, to a girl raised on this, exactly like the future is supposed to smell. The hinges sigh. Inside is your entire hypothetical adulthood, folded and stacked and waiting for a man to make it real. The chest came from the Lane Company, because Lane ran a campaign so thorough that they handed a miniature cedar chest to practically every graduating senior girl in the country, a tiny sample of your own future, delivered to you at 17 like a free perfume strip for marriage. You got the full-size one at Christmas. Your mother cried. You understood, even then, that you had been issued a deadline disguised as a gift. You take inventory, because taking inventory is a ritual, and rituals are comforting even when they are also a slow form of dread. There are pillowcases you embroidered with your own hands, each one bearing a monogram with a blank space where a married initial will eventually go, like a contract waiting on a second signature. There are tablecloths still wrapped in tissue. There is a set of good towels, thick, pale, and absolutely forbidden, because using them now would be like eating the wedding cake before the wedding, a kind of temporal theft. The linens have a personality, and the personality is patient. They do not rush you. They simply wait, immaculate, accumulating, the way a savings account waits. Except the currency is domestic readiness and the interest compounds in anxiety. Every folded napkin is a vote of confidence in a man who has not yet been nominated, let alone elected. Your cousin Eleanor, who married last spring, came over to help you reorganize it once, and Eleanor handled each item with the brisk authority of a woman who had successfully cashed in her own chest and now regarded yours as a charming relic in progress. She refolded your good tablecloth with 3 crisp motions, set it down, smoothed it flat with the side of her hand, and said, not unkindly, that you really ought to add more sheets, as though the shortfall in your linen reserves were the actual reason you are not yet wed. You add a handkerchief to the pile. It is a gesture, an offering to the chest, a way of telling it you are still trying, still contributing to the cause, still a participant in good standing in the great national project of becoming a wife. The chest accepts the handkerchief without comment. The chest never comments. The chest just receives and waits and smells like cedar and patience and the slow accumulation of someone else's expectations. There is a particular cruelty in a hope chest, which is that it is full and empty at the same time. It is full of beautiful things. It is empty of the only thing that would justify them. You close the lid. The cedar exhales one last time, sweet and sharp, and the chest settles back into its job, which is to sit at the foot of your bed being quietly optimistic on your behalf, every hour of the day, including the hours when you cannot manage to be optimistic yourself. You straighten the runner on top of it. You leave the room. Behind you, the chest keeps its vigil, full of towels you cannot use, waiting for a future it is absolutely certain will arrive, because no one has yet had the heart to tell it about the calendar. You get dressed, and getting dressed in 1954 is not an act of covering the body, it is an act of advertising. You pull on nylon stockings and spend 4 full minutes getting the seams to run straight up the back of each calf, because a crooked seam suggests a crooked character. The girdle goes on next and renders your midsection a smooth, diplomatic surface that reveals nothing and forgives less. Every layer is engineering. By the time you reach the front door, you are less a person than a display. The stockings are first, and the stockings are a test of patience disguised as hosiery. They are nylon, sheer, and equipped with a seam that runs the full length of the back of each leg. And that seam must be perfectly straight, because a crooked seam is read by the world as evidence of a crooked life. So you stand at the mirror twisting, craning over your own shoulder, adjusting a line on the back of your calf with the focus of a surgeon, because a woman whose seams wander is a woman who has let things slide. Then the girdle, which is less a garment than a negotiation. It smooths you into a single continuous diplomatic surface that admits nothing and apologizes for nothing and breathes, generously, never. You fasten it and hold a low-grade truce with your own ribcage until bedtime. The girdle's job is to suggest a shape the culture has agreed to find acceptable, and your job is to wear the suggestion all day without fainting in the produce aisle. The slip goes on, then the dress, and the dress sits over a crinoline petticoat, so stiff it rustles like dry leaves and stands several inches off your legs. You will brush every doorframe in the house. The silhouette is fashionable, which is to say wildly impractical. That is, doing exactly what it is meant to do, which is announce that you are a woman with the leisure to be this inconvenient. The hair is its own evening's labour borrowed back the next morning. You set it in pin curls the night before, sleeping on a scalp full of bobby pins that dig in like small grievances, and in the morning you comb it out and lacquer the result with a cloud of aqua net so dense it qualifies as weather. The hairspray is sweet and chemical and faintly suffocating, and the smell of it lives in every powder room in America, a shared national perfume of women holding their shape against the odds. Your neighbour Mrs. Pruitt is doing the exact same routine 2 houses down, and Mrs. Pruitt is 60 and widowed, and still would not be caught dead at the milk box without her face on, because the maintenance does not end at marriage. The maintenance, you are beginning to suspect, does not end at all. The maintenance is the job. It was always the job. Lipstick last, the punctuation mark on the sentence. You apply Revlon in a shade with a name like Fire and Ice, blot it on a tissue that keeps a perfect ghost of your mouth, and snap the compact shut with a decisive click that feels, briefly, like being in charge of something. The compact is the one part of this you genuinely like. It is small and it closes, and it does what it is told. You stand back and assess the finished product in the mirror, and the finished product is not exactly you. It is you, sanded and lacquered and engineered, presented at the optimal angle for acquisition. The apparatus has a single purpose, which the mirror states plainly and without cruelty, to make a man, somewhere, eventually, decide. By the time you reach the front door, you have spent the better part of an hour becoming a display, and the display does not get to rest until the lights go off. You pick up your handbag. You step out into the morning, fully assembled, the seams of you running straight and true, a one-woman storefront open for the day. You are sitting on your bed with a copy of McCall's open to an article titled 129 Ways to Get a Husband, and you are reading it the way a drowning person reads a manual on swimming, which is to say desperately and with growing concern. The magazine has compiled these strategies from 16 separate experts. You are expected to deploy them. You get a pencil. You start, against your own better judgment, to take notes, because the alternative to taking this seriously is unthinkable and also, technically, against the rules. The strategies are numbered, which gives them a false air of science, as though a husband were a chemistry problem and the magazine had simply worked out the formula. Some are reasonable. Make a lot of money, says one, which is rich advice for a readership the newspaper has just sorted into the lower-paying column. Get a dog and walk it, says another, and you will admit that one has a certain practical sense, the dog functioning as a furry conversation starter on 4 legs. Then the article loses its mind. Stand on a busy street corner with a lasso suggests strategy after strategy, and you read it twice to confirm that a national magazine is advising you to physically rope a passing man like livestock. Stand in a corner and cry softly, says another, because a man cannot resist a woman in mild public distress, the way a Labrador cannot resist a dropped sandwich. Make and sell toupees, the magazine offers, because bald men make easy catches, which presents the husband hunt as a kind of targeted retail operation aimed at the follically vulnerable. It escalates. Paint your name and number on a roof, the article says, and add the words "give me a buzz" pilots on the apparent theory that the aviation industry is full of single men idly scanning suburban rooftops for romance. Sink slowly at a fashionable beach at high noon, suggests another, so that a strong man will be obliged to rescue you, drowning recast as a meet cute. Bribe a Ferris wheel operator to strand your car at the top, beside the man of your choosing. A strategy that combines romance, extortion, and a mild hostage situation into one efficient afternoon. Your friend Ruth is reading over your shoulder, snorting, and Ruth taps strategy 41 with one lacquered nail and reads it aloud in the voice of a courtroom announcement. Learn to play poker. The two of you laugh, genuinely, the way you only can about the things that are also slowly crushing you, because underneath the absurdity is the part that is not funny at all, which is that the magazine is not joking, and neither is anyone else. The thing that gets you is that you are taking notes. You have a pencil in your hand and you have, without quite deciding to, underlined "get a dog." That is the trap of the document. It is ridiculous, and you are following it anyway, because the consequence of not following it is a word you do not want applied to your name, and a magazine that will hand you a lasso is at least a magazine that has not given up on you. You reach the end. Strategy 129, the grand finale, the distilled wisdom of 16 experts, advises you not to marry a man if he has too many loose buttons. After 128 increasingly unhinged instructions for acquiring a husband by any means, including rope and light fraud, The article closes by reminding you to maintain standards. Inspect his buttons. A man who cannot keep his buttons fastened cannot be trusted, presumably with your entire future. You close the magazine. Ruth has already moved on to the advertisements, where a smiling bride displays her new refrigerator like a hostage, proving she is unharmed. You sit there with your pencil and your underlined dog and your faint nausea, a fully grown woman who has just consulted a numbered list for permission to exist, and you understand that you will, in fact, probably get a dog. You are in your second year at a perfectly good college, studying a subject you genuinely like, and everyone around you, including the college itself, understands that the real degree you are here to earn is pronounced Mrs. The academic one is a backup. The phrase on campus is a ring by spring, and it is not a joke. It is a deadline with a season attached. You have a paper due Thursday and a dance on Friday, and only one of those is considered a graduation requirement, and it is not the paper. The college does not advertise this, exactly, but it does not have to, because everyone arrived already knowing. The men are studying to become things, doctors and engineers and lawyers, professions with nameplates. The women are studying to become Mrs. Something, and the major is almost beside the point, a respectable way to occupy the hands while the real work proceeds in the evenings, on the dance floors, in the parked cars, anywhere a proposal might plausibly originate. The phrase is a ring by spring, and it functions as a deadline with a season attached. You are meant to enter in the fall unattached and exit in June engaged, having converted 4 years of tuition into one diamond and a change of surname. A girl who graduates without a fiancé has, in the quiet arithmetic of the dormitory, failed the more important examination, the one not printed on any transcript. Your roommate is named Sylvia, and Sylvia is brilliant, genuinely, the kind of brilliant that wins the essay prize and then does not know where to put it. Sylvia underlines passages in her books well past midnight with a fierce little pencil, arguing in the margins with men who have been dead for centuries. And Sylvia also lies awake worrying about whether a boy named Hal is going to pin her before the formal, because both of these things are true at once and the college has made no room for the contradiction. You watch the seniors most closely, because the seniors are running out of road. By spring of senior year, the unengaged ones move through the dining hall with a particular brightness, a determined cheerfulness pulled slightly too tight across the face, like a tablecloth on a table that is the wrong size. They have done everything right. They have studied and danced and worn the correct shade of pink, and the diamond has simply, stubbornly, declined to appear, and June is coming the way June always comes. The house mother, Mrs. Tewkesbury, presides over all of it from a chair near the front parlour, knitting something that never seems to get longer, monitoring the comings and goings with the alert, patient, and predatory stillness of a heron at a pond. She knows which girls are pinned and which are not. She keeps the curfew. She signs the book. She is, in her cardigan and her glasses, the local enforcement arm of a deadline that no statute created, and she enforces it gently, which is the only way it has ever needed to be enforced. You sit in a lecture you actually love, on a subject that lights something up behind your ribs, and you take real notes, and for 50 minutes you forget the entire apparatus. Then the bell rings and you file out into the corridor where a bulletin board announces the spring formal, and the apparatus closes back over your head like water, and you remember that the lecture was the hobby and the formal is the curriculum. The cruelty of it is not that the college lies. The college does not lie. The cruelty is that it offers you the whole banquet, the books and the ideas and the brilliant roommate and the lit-up feeling behind your ribs, and then tells you, with a straight face, that the point of the banquet was always to help you find someone to cook for. You came here to learn. You will leave, if you are lucky, claimed. The transcript will say one thing. Everyone will read the other. A young man named Donald has asked you to go steady, and going steady means something specific, with paperwork that is emotional rather than legal. It means you date only each other. It means he gives you something to wear that announces this to the world, usually his class ring, which is heavy and sized for a hand twice the width of yours. You accept it. Now you have to make it fit. And making it fit is its own small engineering problem with social stakes attached to every turn of the solution. Going steady is the first real rung on the ladder, the official downgrade from available to spoken for, and it arrives not with a contract but with an object. Donald hands you his class ring across a booth at the malt shop, sliding it over the formica with the gravity of a man transferring a deed, and you understand that you have just been in the local language, claimed. The ring is gold, heavy, and engraved with the crest of a high school you did not attend, which makes you a kind of ambassador for his adolescence. The problem is immediate and physical, because the ring was sized for Donald, whose hands could palm a melon, and your finger is a more modest instrument. So you do what every girl does. You wind the band with Angora yarn, soft and fuzzy and slightly absurd, wrapping it around and around until the ring fits your finger and announces, to anyone within 10 feet, that you have a boyfriend with large hands and good intentions. The yarn is usually pastel. The effect is somewhere between an engagement and a craft project. Now there are rules, and the rules are unwritten and absolute. You do not dance more than once with another boy. You do not accept a Coke from anyone else. You wear the ring on a chain around your neck when your hands are busy, so that it rides over your heart like a gold reminder of your changed status, warm from your own skin. You have, in effect, taken a man off the market and removed yourself in the same gesture, and the school now files you mentally under Donald. Donald is decent. This is important to say, because the system would be easier to hate if the men in it were villains, and mostly they are not. They are just boys who have absorbed the same script from the other side. Donald walks you home. Donald carries your books, stacking them against his hip with a practiced little hitch, and tells you about the car he is saving for, and he is kind. And he is also, you are aware, your most realistic candidate, which is a strange thing to feel at 24 about a person you genuinely like. Your friend Ruth went steady with 3 different boys in 2 years, collecting and returning class rings like library books, and the dormitory took note because there is a fine and closely watched line between popular and something less flattering, and a girl who goes steady too many times begins to attract a different kind of comment. The ring is supposed to move in one direction only, from his hand to your neck to, eventually, a jeweler downtown. To return it is to reset the clock, and the clock, you remember, is the thing you cannot afford. So you keep Donald's ring wound in its pale yarn, and you wear it, and you let the school file you. And most days this feels less like romance than like holding a good position in a long line. You like him. How? You might love him. It is genuinely hard to tell, because the question of whether you love Donald and the question of whether you can afford to lose Donald have been pressed so tightly together that you can no longer get a knife between them. The ring sits warm against your chest. The line inches forward. You hold your place. Donald is in a fraternity, and the fraternity has a ritual for the moment a relationship becomes serious, and the ritual is called pinning, and it involves him giving you a small, enamelled pin in front of an audience. There may be candles. There may be brothers humming. You stand in the doorway of the sorority house while grown men in cardigans perform a ceremony usually reserved for knighthoods and minor coronations. The pin weighs almost nothing. What it means weighs considerably more, and everyone in the room is doing the math out loud. Pinning sits one rung above going steady, the step just before engagement, and unlike going steady, it comes with a ceremony, because the fraternity has decided that a small enamelled pin changing hands is an occasion requiring witnesses, candles, and a degree of solemnity normally reserved for the swearing in of judges. Donald is a member of a fraternity with Greek letters and a handshake, and the fraternity has rituals, and you are about to be the object of one. It happens in the evening, in the front room of the sorority house, and the production values are higher than you expected. The lights go down. The brothers arrive in a loose semicircle, scrubbed, combed, and freshly pressed in their good sweaters, and they begin to hum, an actual harmonized hum, a wordless masculine drone that is meant to be romantic and lands somewhere closer to a refrigerator achieving sentience. Your sorority sisters press in behind you, gripping your arms, vibrating with a joy so intense it borders on the territorial. Donald steps forward holding the pin, which is tiny, roughly the size of a postage stamp, a little gold thing with the fraternity letters and a chip of enamel. He fastens it to your sweater with the careful, terrified concentration of a man defusing an explosive, his big hands trembling slightly, and the room holds its breath while he negotiates the clasp. When it catches, the sisters erupt. Someone is already crying. Mrs. Tewkesbury, watching from the doorway, dabs once at her eye with a folded handkerchief and resumes her vigil. Satisfied, another girl safely advanced toward the harbour. The pin weighs almost nothing. You can barely feel it on the wool. What it weighs is entirely social, and socially it weighs a great deal. because to be pinned is to be understood as nearly engaged, pre-engaged, engaged with a learner's permit. It is a public announcement, ratified by candlelight and witnessed by 30 humming witnesses, that you and Donald are on the track, and the track has one destination, and everyone in this room has just signed on as a witness to your progress along it. Afterward there is punch, pink and sweet and slightly warm, ladled from a cut glass bowl by a sister who keeps congratulating you in a voice gone wobbly with emotion. People keep touching the pin on your sweater, gently, the way you might touch a charm for luck, and asking when. The question-pinned women are asked from the moment the enamel touches the wool. You smile. You say soon, maybe, we will see, the diplomatic vocabulary of a woman who has been advanced one square and is now expected to be visibly grateful about it. Later, alone in your room, you unpin the pin and set it on the dresser and look at it, this gold thing that has rearranged your standing in the entire house. It is genuinely sweet, the trembling hands, the bad humming, the crying sisters, the warm punch. And it is also a milestone on a route you did not entirely choose, a candlelit checkpoint on the way to a destination the culture selected for you before you could read. You set the pin down on the dresser scarf. Tomorrow you will wear it again, because that is the point of it, to be worn, to be seen, to advance you one more square toward the only finish line anyone has ever offered. There are rules about how a date gets arranged, and the first rule is that you do not arrange it. He does. The second rule is timing. A man who wants to take you out on Friday is expected to ask by Wednesday at the very latest, because asking on the day itself implies you had nothing else planned, which implies no one else wanted you, which is the precise impression the entire system is built to prevent. So you wait by a calendar. You watch Wednesday approach. You do not call him. You cannot. The logic behind the rule is a small masterpiece of social engineering. A man who asks too early seems overeager. A man who asks the day of seems to assume you have no other prospects, which insults you by implying no one else wanted the evening. So the system has settled on Wednesday as the polite outer edge for a Friday date, a window narrow enough to flatter and wide enough to plan, and everyone has agreed to pretend this is a law of nature rather than a thing somebody made up. The arrangement is basically an HOA for courtship, with bylaws nobody signed and penalties nobody can appeal. For you, on the receiving end, the rule means you wait. You cannot call him. Calling him is unthinkable, a violation so total it does not even need a written prohibition, because a woman who telephones a man to propose an outing has, in the local theology, committed the cardinal sin of wanting something out loud. So you stay near the hallway phone on Tuesday and Wednesday, doing things in its vicinity, dusting a table that is not dusty, rearranging a bowl of wax fruit that has not moved since the Truman administration. The waiting has a texture, and the texture is humiliating in a quiet way you would never admit. You are a grown woman organizing your entire week around whether a man named Donald will perform a simple act of telephoning before Wednesday dinner, and the worst part is that you are good at it. You have become expert at hovering, at being near the phone without appearing to be near the phone, at picking it up on the second ring so as not to seem eager, and not the fourth so as not to seem indifferent. Your mother understands the stakes precisely and contributes a running commentary disguised as housework. She passes through the hall, glances at the silent phone, and says nothing, which is louder than anything she could say. When it finally rings on Wednesday at 6, she freezes mid-step in the doorway, a dish towel suspended in her hand like a flag at a tense moment in a war film, and you both stare at the phone as though it might detonate. It is Donald. Of course it is Donald. He asks, in the slightly formal voice boys use for this, whether you would care to see the picture on Friday, and you let exactly the correct amount of pause hang on the line, the pause that says you were not waiting, you were busy, you have a rich, crowded, and faintly enviable life of which he is one welcome part, and then you say yes, you would like that. Your mother exhales and resumes wiping the dish, vindicated, the war won for another week. You hang up the heavy receiver and stand in the hall, and the strange thing is the relief, the genuine flood of it, because the call came in time and the week is now structured correctly and you are, by Friday at least, a woman with somewhere to be. That is what the rule does. It takes the simple act of two people deciding to see a film and turns it into a minor ordeal of timing and silence and suspended dish towels, and then it rewards you, when the system works, with a feeling out of all proportion to the event, which is gratitude. You are grateful he called by Wednesday. You hate that you are grateful. You are grateful anyway. The date happens at a soda fountain because the approved venues for courtship are public, supervised, and sticky. You sit at a marble counter that is cold under your forearms while a machine hisses somewhere behind it, and a cherry Coke arrives in a tall glass sweating with condensation, and it has 2 straws in it. The 2 straws are not an accident. The 2 straws are a statement of intent that neither of you is brave enough to make with words. You lean toward one straw, he leans toward the other. The soda fountain is one of the few approved arenas for courtship, which means it has been selected precisely because nothing can happen here. It is public, it is brightly lit, it is supervised by a man in a paper hat, and it is sticky, the floor faintly adhesive with decades of spilled syrup, so that even your shoes are chaperones. You slide into a booth across from Donald and the marble counter is cold against your forearm, and somewhere behind the counter a machine exhales steam with a long mechanical sigh, as though it too is tired of watching young people fail to confess things. The soda jerk is named Hank, and Hank has worked this counter long enough to have witnessed roughly 400 courtships at various stages of bloom and collapse, and he reads your booth at a glance the way a farmer reads a sky. He builds your cherry Coke with the unhurried competence of a man who has done it 10,000 times. A long pull of syrup, the hiss of the soda, a cherry dropped on top like a small red verdict, and he sets it down between you and Donald with 2 straws already standing in it, and then he withdraws, because Hank knows when a counter needs a witness and when it needs privacy. The 2 straws are the entire event. Nobody decided on 2 straws allowed. The glass simply arrives equipped for sharing, and now the 2 of you must navigate the geometry of leaning toward a single beverage from opposite sides of a booth, your foreheads approaching a treaty line somewhere over the ice, close enough to smell his hair tonic, which is doing battle with the vanilla in the air and losing. The Coke sweats. The condensation pools on the marble. You lean toward your straw. He leans toward his. This is romance as the era has engineered it. A courtship conducted entirely through props and proximity, because words are too dangerous and touch is forbidden, and all of it must be conductible in front of Hank and God and anyone walking past the plate glass window. You talk about the picture you are going to see. You talk about everything except the only subject in the room, which is whether this, the 2 of you, the cherry Coke, the cold marble, is going somewhere with a diamond at the end of it. Donald, to his credit, is trying. He has put on a clean shirt, and he keeps the conversation moving, and at one point he slides the cherry across the rim of the glass toward your side with one finger. A gesture so small and so loaded that you nearly laugh, because he has just performed, with a maraschino cherry, the most direct romantic statement of the evening. You take the cherry. He looks relieved, like a man who has cleared a fence. The jukebox in the corner clicks and drops a record, and a crooner begins explaining your exact situation in 3 minutes of strings, and you sit in the cold, bright, sticky public safety of the soda fountain, sharing a drink with a decent boy under the watchful eye of a man in a paper hat, and you think, this is it. This is courtship. This is the whole machine in operation. It is sweet. It is also as supervised as a parole hearing. You finish the Coke from your own straw, and the ice rattles, and Hank, without being asked, is already wiping down the next stretch of counter for the next booth in the long assembly line of the hopeful. The telephone in your hallway is shared with 4 neighbouring households on what is called a party line, which means that at any given moment a conversation can have a live, breathing, judgmental audience you did not invite. When Donald is supposed to call, you wait near the phone and pretend not to. When it rings, you let it ring twice, because answering on the first ring is undignified. Mrs. Pruitt, 2 houses down, picks up her own extension to listen, as she does, contributing nothing and absorbing everything, a one-woman intelligence agency in a housecoat. A party line means your telephone is not entirely yours. It is shared among several households strung along the same wire, and only one conversation can travel it at a time, which means privacy is theoretical and eavesdropping is practically a municipal utility. You lift the receiver hoping for a dial tone, and sometimes you get instead the breathing presence of a neighbour mid-sentence, and you must hang up and wait your turn, which gives the entire street a rough sense of who is talking to whom and for how long. The unrivaled master of this system is Mrs. Pruitt, 2 houses down, who has elevated listening to your calls into a kind of devotional practice. When Donald telephones, you hear it, the telltale soft click partway through the connection, the almost imperceptible change in the quality of the silence that means a second receiver has been lifted very, very gently somewhere down the line, and you know, with total certainty that Mrs. Pruitt is now in your conversation, breathing into the wire, contributing nothing, absorbing everything, a one-woman intelligence service, patient, tireless, and faintly devout, operating out of a housecoat. So you and Donald conduct your courtship in a code that is not really a code, full of long pauses and careful phrasings, both of you aware of the third party on the line. He says he had a nice time Friday. You say so did you. Neither of you says anything you would not say in front of a notary, because effectively you are, and the romance is conducted at the emotional temperature of two people reading a lease aloud to each other, while a stranger transcribes it for the neighborhood. The information does not stay on the wire. By the next morning it has traveled, somehow, mysteriously, through the invisible plumbing of the street, and the woman at the bakery counter knows that Donald called, and your mother's friend Gladys knows how long the call lasted, and the entire block has formed a committee opinion on the health and trajectory of your relationship before you have finished your toast. The party line is not a phone system. It is a printing press that runs on gossip and operates without your consent. You once tried to outsmart it, lowering your voice, leaning into the wall, cupping the receiver, and you could practically feel Mrs. Pruitt leaning in harder on her end. The two of you locked in a silent contest of audio espionage conducted across 100 yards of suburban wire. She won. She always wins. She has nothing but time and a vested interest in everyone else's business, which is the most dangerous combination a neighborhood can produce, and she has weaponized a telephone into a surveillance state with curtains. And yet you cannot fully hate her, because Mrs. Pruitt is also, you suspect, lonely. A widow with a quiet house and a loud interest in lives that are still in motion, listening to your courtship the way other people listen to the radio, because it is a story and she wants to know how it ends. You picture her down the line, receiver pressed to her ear, rooting for you, or against you, it hardly matters which, just glad of the company of a voice. You finish the call, you hang up, somewhere 2 houses down, you hear, or imagine you hear, a second receiver settle back into its cradle, the audience filing out until the next performance. There is a dance on Saturday, and a dance is not entertainment. A dance is a marketplace with a band. You stand along the wall in a dress engineered for exactly this lighting, and you perform the specific labor of looking available but not eager, interested but not desperate, present but not, God forbid, conspicuous about being present. Boys cross the floor or they do not. The space along the wall where unchosen girls accumulate has a name, and the name is Wallflower, and you are very aware of the temperature of the wall behind you. A dance is a marketplace with a band, and like any marketplace it has a floor, a set of goods, and a brutally efficient pricing mechanism that operates in real time and in full public view. You arrive in a dress chosen for exactly this lighting, you check your coat, and you take up a position along the wall with the other girls. And from this moment your entire worth is being quoted, second by second, in the only currency that matters here, which is whether a boy crosses the floor toward you. The wall is the danger zone. To stand against it briefly, between dances, is fine, a natural pause. To stand against it for too long is to become a wallflower, a girl the floor has declined to bid on, and the word itself does the cruel work of making your stillness sound decorative, as though you had chosen to be furniture. You feel the temperature of the wall through the back of your dress. You feel each song begin, and the boys move and the math resolve, and you perform the specific, impossible labor of looking pleased to be exactly where you are, which is unchosen against a wall. The boys travel the floor in loose packs, conferring, assessing, working up the nerve, and a girl can watch a boy decide, watch the quiet drama of him being nudged by a friend and shaking his head and then squaring his shoulders and starting across, and the question is only ever toward whom. When the trajectory bends toward you, the relief is enormous and instant and slightly shameful, a flood of gratitude for having been selected from the inventory, and you must dampen it down into a cool, pleasant surprise, because eagerness is a discount and you are trying to hold your price. Your friend Ruth is magnificent at this, working the room with an ease you frankly envy, laughing at the right volume, never against the wall for more than a song, and you watch her technique the way an apprentice watches a master, the tilt of the head, the timing of the laugh, the art of needing nothing while arranging to receive everything. Ruth catches your eye across the floor and gives you a tiny, private grimace. the secret signal between two women who both know exactly what game is being played and are playing it anyway because the alternative is not playing. And not playing is its own loud answer. The band plays on, soaring through the same dozen songs that every dance everywhere is built on, and the trumpet player has clearly given up hope of anyone listening, because the music is not the point. The music is the metronome the marketplace runs on, a beat to fill the terrible silence that would otherwise expose it for the auction it is. When Donald appears, finally, and asks you to dance, you go gladly, and for 3 minutes you are off the wall and on the floor and accounted for, a girl who was chosen, and the relief carries you through the song. But you do not forget the wall. You will be back against it when the song ends, between bids, quoting your price, and you know now that this is what the dances are for. Not joy, not music, not even romance exactly, but sorting, the steady public sorting of the chosen from the not yet chosen, conducted to a trumpet on a Saturday, until the band packs up and the lights come on and reveal who is leaving with whom. On Tuesday evenings you attend charm school, where a woman with immaculate posture teaches you to become the kind of person a man decides to marry. You walk across a room with a book on your head. You learn to sit so that your ankles cross but your knees never part. You are taught to enter a conversation, hold it gently, and never win it. The curriculum is you, refined and sanded down to a more marriageable finish, and you are paying tuition for the privilege of being made smaller with excellent technique. The instructor is named Miss Beaumont, and Miss Beaumont has the posture of a woman who has issued a spine of superior quality and has never once misused it. She glides rather than walks. She enters the room as though the room had been waiting for her, which it had, and she surveys the row of slouching hopefuls with the patient sorrow of a sculptor looking at a particularly unpromising block of marble. You are the marble. The marble has bad posture and a tendency to laugh too loud. The first lesson is the book. You place a hardcover on your head, a dictionary works well, and you walk the length of the room without dropping it, which teaches you to hold your chin level and your shoulders back, and your entire body in a state of permanent gentle alarm. Miss Beaumont walks beside you, correcting, a finger touched lightly to the small of your back, and the book wobbles and you stiffen, and somewhere a girl named Loretta drops hers with a bang, and we all pretend not to notice Loretta's marble problem. Then comes the sitting, which is its own discipline. You lower yourself into a chair without looking at it, because there are exactly 2 acceptable ways to sit, and watching the chair is neither, a maneuver requiring blind faith and strong thighs, and you arrange your ankles crossed and tucked to one side, knees sealed together as if guarding a state secret, hands folded in your lap like 2 well-behaved pets. You are taught to occupy the smallest dignified volume of space a human can occupy, because a woman who sprawls is a woman who presumes, and presumption is not on the curriculum. The conversation lessons are the ones that get under your skin. Miss Beaumont teaches you to enter a discussion gently, to ask questions, to draw the gentleman out, to be interested rather than interesting, and above all, she says, tapping the word into the air with one manicured finger, never to win. A woman who wins an argument has lost something larger. You may know the answer, you may know it cold, with footnotes. You will smile and let him arrive at it himself, and you will look faintly delighted when he does, as though he had invented fire in front of you. The curriculum, you slowly realize, is subtraction. It is not adding polish to you so much as removing the parts of you that stick out, sanding the laugh down to a smaller laugh, filing the opinions into questions, planing the personality until it fits neatly into the space a husband is expected to leave for it. You are paying tuition, with your own money or your father's, to be made into less, and to be made into less with such excellent technique that it will read, from the outside, as grace. And the genuinely strange part is that some of it is pleasant. The room is warm, close, and faintly powdered, smelling of the radiator's dry heat, and there is a real camaraderie among the marble, Loretta and her dropped book and the rest of you, all being smoothed down together. You learn to pour tea. You learn to glide. You leave each Tuesday standing straighter and feeling, against every instinct you trust, slightly improved, which is the most insidious thing about the place, that it works, that you do walk taller, that the cage, when fitted well, can feel a great deal like good posture. At school you take home economics, a class that exists to certify that you can run a household you do not yet have for a husband you have not yet acquired. You learn to iron a man's shirt before you have met the man who will wear it. You budget an imaginary salary that will be someone else's. You bake a casserole, and the casserole is graded, and the grade is, in a sense, a forecast of your entire future, baked at 350 degrees and served to a teacher holding a clipboard and your destiny. The teacher is Mrs. Lindqvist, who runs the home economics room like the captain of a tidy and slightly grim ship, and the room itself is a marvel, a row of miniature kitchens lined up like stalls, each with its own little stove and sink, a whole training facility for a war you will fight alone, daily, for the rest of your life, against dust and hunger and the judgment of other women. Today you are ironing a man's dress shirt, and there is no man, which gives the exercise a faintly haunting quality, like setting a place at dinner for a guest who has not been born. Mrs. Lindqvist demonstrates the sequence: collar first, then the yoke, then the cuffs, then the sleeves, then the body, a liturgy of creases, and you follow along pressing sharp lines into the cotton of a phantom husband's wardrobe, while the iron hisses and spits and the smell of hot starch fills the room like incense in a very domestic church. The budgeting unit is its own quiet comedy. You are handed an imaginary salary, a man's salary, and asked to stretch it across an imaginary household, allotting so much for rent and so much for groceries, and a careful little column for savings, and you do the sums dutifully for a paycheck that will never have your name on it, managing money you will not earn for a family that does not exist, like an accountant for a company that is still, technically, a rumour. Then the casserole, and the casserole is graded. You assemble it according to the recipe, a humble architecture of noodles and canned soup and whatever protein the week allowed, and you slide it into the oven at 350 degrees, and 40 minutes later Mrs. Lindqvist approaches with a fork and a clipboard and tastes a forkful with the grave concentration of a judge at a trial whose defendant is your entire domestic future. She makes a note. The note is, in a sense, a prophecy. The thing nobody says aloud, though everyone in the room feels it, is that the casserole is not really food. It is evidence. It is a sample of the wife you will become, baked and submitted for evaluation, and the grade is a forecast, an official document predicting whether you will keep a man fed and therefore keep a man. Sally Ann, 2 stations over, has produced something that has collapsed in the centre and wept a clear liquid, and Sally Ann is staring into the wreckage of her casserole with the look of a girl reading a bad fortune, because she knows what the dish is really saying about her. You carry your own casserole to the front, and it holds together, golden, bubbling, and structurally sound, and Mrs. Lindqvist tastes it and nods once, an economical nod, and writes something approving, and you feel a flush of pride so disproportionate it embarrasses you. Pride in a noodle dish, pride in passing a test whose subject is your own usefulness to a man you have not met. You did well. You are, the clipboard suggests, going to make someone a fine wife. You carry the warm dish back to your station, and you cannot decide whether to feel competent or sold, and you settle, as you so often do, for both at once. Your aunt knows a young man. Your aunt always knows a young man. This is how the blind date works in 1954, as a logistics operation run by relatives who have decided that your singleness is a problem they are personally equipped to solve. You are handed a name, a time, and a vague physical description, and you are expected to show up at a restaurant and be charming at a total stranger your family has pre-approved like a loan. He arrives. You both already know why you are here. Nobody says it. The machinery of the blind date runs on relatives, and your chief operator is Aunt Marion, who regards your unmarried state as a logistical problem she was put on this earth to solve, the way other women take up canasta. She knows a young man. She always knows a young man. This one is named Gerald. He works in insurance. He is, she reports, very steady, which is the word families use for a man when they have run out of more exciting words and landed on the one that means he will not embarrass you at the bank. You're handed the particulars like an assignment, a name, a time, a restaurant, and a physical description so vague it could apply to half the men in the state, brown hair, average height, a nice smile, which describes a smile she has decided in advance that he has. You are expected to arrive, locate this stranger your family has pre-approved like a mortgage, and be charming at him across a basket of dinner rolls, both of you fully aware of why you are here, neither of you permitted to say it. Gerald is, in fact, perfectly fine. He stands when you arrive, pulls out your chair with a scrape, and orders for both of you, which the era considers gallant, and you spend a moment mourning the dish you would have chosen before settling into the one he selected on your behalf. He talks about insurance with the quiet passion other men reserve for baseball. He is steady. Aunt Marion was right. He is so steady you could set a level on him and build a shelf. The conversation has the particular awkwardness of two people performing an audition while pretending to have a meal. Every topic is secretly a test. When he asks whether you like children, the dinner rolls hold their breath. When you ask about his work, you are calculating salary and prospects with a part of your brain charm school did not manage to sand away. You are both reading each other like prospectuses, and the candle between you flickers over two faces working very hard to seem relaxed, casual, and unbothered about a transaction disguised as a date. There is no spark. You both know there is no spark roughly 4 minutes in, and the remaining 90 minutes become an exercise in graceful endurance. Two polite people running out the clock on an evening that relatives engineered, eating dinner rolls neither of you wanted, agreeing about the weather, the soup, the difficulty of parking. Gerald is not the problem. You are not the problem. The arrangement is the problem. The idea that romance can be sourced through an aunt, the way one sources a reliable plumber. He drives you home in a car that smells of new upholstery and pipe tobacco, walks you to the door, and says, with genuine decency, that he had a nice time, and you say so did you, and you both know you will report back to Aunt Marion that he was lovely, and it simply was not quite right. The standard verdict, the one that protects everyone's feelings and admits nothing. Inside, your aunt will be waiting by the phone, ready to deploy the next young man, because Aunt Marion does not lose heart. Aunt Marion has a deep bench, and the supply of steady Geralds in insurance is, as far as you can tell, effectively infinite. If a proposal ever comes, it is supposed to arrive attached to a diamond, and the diamond is not optional, it is the receipt. You have absorbed this from advertisements so thoroughly that you no longer remember learning it. A man demonstrates seriousness by converting a measurable portion of his income into a small, hard stone, and the size of the stone is read, by everyone, as the depth of the feeling. You catch yourself glancing at other women's left hands the way an appraiser glances at a painting. You hate that you do this. You do it anyway. The diamond is not a tradition you inherited so much as a habit you were trained into, and the training was so total that you cannot locate the moment it happened. You simply know, in the marrow, that a real proposal arrives attached to a diamond, that a man demonstrates the seriousness of his intentions by converting a measurable slice of his income into a small, hard, and transparent stone, and that the stone is then read, by everyone, as a receipt for the depth of his love. The strange truth, if you ever stop to examine it, is that this conviction is almost brand new. The diamond engagement ring became compulsory not through ancient custom but through advertising, a campaign launched by the De Beers Company in 1947, the year a copywriter named Francis Geraghty, working late and nearly out of ideas, scrawled the line, "A diamond is forever," and went to bed. That single sentence, 4 words written by a tired woman in Philadelphia, rebuilt the engagement ring into a national requirement within about a decade, within your own lifetime. But you do not think about Francis Geraghty when you catch yourself, in the powder room at a party, glancing at another woman's left hand. You think about the stone. You have become, without consent or training, an appraiser, your eye flicking to the third finger of every woman you meet, and reading it instantly into exactly 3 recognized verdicts: married, engaged, or nothing yet. You hate this reflex. It is petty and it is competitive and it reduces other women to the hardware they are wearing, and you do it anyway, automatically, 100 times a week. The size becomes a language you did not choose to learn but speak fluently. A large stone says he is doing well and he is serious. A small stone says he loves her but the insurance business is slow. No stone, on a woman past a certain age, says something the room will discuss later in lowered voices. The diamond has become a public credential, a glittering report card worn on the hand, and everyone has agreed to read it, and you read it too, and you are read in return. Your own bare finger entered into the ledger of every party you attend. Donald, you happen to know, has been putting money aside, because he mentioned the car he is saving for and then went slightly pink and changed the subject, and you understood that the car was a cover story, and the real savings have a smaller and harder destination. You did not push. You are not allowed to push. You are allowed only to wait, and to wonder, and to perform a careful indifference to a stone you have already imagined on your own hand more times than you will ever confess. This would be easier to despise if you were immune to it, but you are not. You want the diamond. Not for the carbon, not even really for Donald, but for what it would end. The glancing and the being glanced at, the ledger, the lowered voices, the long public audit of your bare left hand. The ring is not jewelry. The ring is a verdict in your favour, the one piece of evidence that would finally close the case the town has been quietly building, and you want it the way the accused wants an acquittal, desperately, and against your own better judgment, and with your whole tired heart. Beyond the hope chest there is the trousseau, which is the wardrobe and linen collection a bride is expected to assemble in advance, and assembling it is a years-long project of acquiring nice things for a life that remains hypothetical. You read bridal magazines that instruct you on a wedding you have not been proposed for. You set aside nightgowns too good to wear. You are building, item by careful item, the physical infrastructure of a marriage, and the only component missing is the entire other person, who remains, frustratingly, theoretical. The bridal magazines are the engine of the trousseau, and they are merciless. You buy them at the drugstore, thick, glossy, and heavy as a phone book, and you carry them home in a paper bag like contraband, and you read them in bed the way other people read scripture, studying weddings you have not been proposed for a groom who remains theoretical, in a future that is, at this stage, entirely staffed by you and an imaginary man in a rented tuxedo. The magazine instructs you in everything. It tells you how many nightgowns a properly equipped bride requires, and the number is alarming, and it tells you they should be good ones. Silk where you can manage it, and so you begin buying nightgowns too fine to actually wear, folding them into the chest with the towels, building a luxurious wardrobe for a wedding night that floats somewhere out in the unscheduled future. You own lingerie you have never worn for a man who does not exist. It is, when you say it plainly, a peculiar way to spend a Tuesday. There is a logic to the accumulation that feels almost financial, as though you were a small nation-building infrastructure ahead of a population boom. You lay in the linens, the nightgowns, the everyday china and the good china, the serving pieces, the items the magazine swears a household cannot function without. All of it stockpiled against a marriage that has not been declared. You are constructing, item by careful item, the entire physical plant of a domestic life, and the only component you cannot purchase at the drugstore is the husband, who remains stubbornly, infuriatingly out of stock. The clerk at the bridal counter downtown knows you by now, a thin, patient woman named Mrs. Cosgrove who has watched you finger the same monogrammed handkerchiefs for 2 seasons, and Mrs. Cosgrove never asks the obvious question, never says and when is the happy day, because Mrs. Cosgrove has been doing this long enough to know which customers to spare. She simply wraps your purchase in tissue, ties it with a string, and slides it across the counter with a kind nod, one professional to another, both of them maintaining the polite fiction that a wedding is imminent. The cruelty of the trousseau is the same as the cruelty of the hope chest, only louder, because the trousseau is active, ongoing, a thing you tend weekly, a garden of marital readiness you water with your own modest wages, while the actual marriage refuses to germinate. Each beautiful folded thing is a bet placed on a future you cannot control, and the pile grows, and the silk yellows very slightly at the folds with the years, and you tell yourself the yellowing is nothing, that silk does that it means nothing about how long you have been waiting. You add a nightgown to the chest, pale and weightless and smelling faintly of the cedar it will live in, and you close the lid, and for a moment you let yourself imagine the man who will eventually see it, and the picture is pleasant and entirely faceless, a husband-shaped blank you have been furnishing a life around for years. Then you tuck the magazine under your arm and go down to dinner, a woman with a complete trousseau and no groom, fully equipped for a wedding that exists, so far, only in the glossy pages and the cedar smell and the patient growing pile of beautiful things you are not yet allowed to use. There is a mathematics to this that no one teaches in the home economics class, and it is unkind. Men prefer to marry women younger than themselves, which means that every year you age, the pool of men looking your direction shifts its attention one notch down toward the girls just behind you, the 17-year-olds, with fresh prospects and undamaged optimism. You are not competing against other 24-year-olds. You are competing against time itself, and time has recruited a steady supply of replacements, all of them arriving on schedule and none of them tired yet. The mathematics is never taught in any class, which is part of how it does its work, silently, in the background, like a tax you only notice when the bill comes. It runs like this. Men prefer to marry women younger than themselves, a preference treated as natural as weather, and so the pool of available men does not age alongside you. It stays roughly where it is and looks, each year, slightly further down the line, toward the girls just entering the market behind you, fresh and 17, and undamaged by the waiting. This means you are not, as you assumed, competing against the other 24-year-olds. You are competing against time itself, and time has been quietly recruiting your replacements, a steady annual delivery of younger women arriving on schedule, none of them tired yet, none of them carrying the faint air of having been passed over that begins, at your age, to cling to a woman like a scent she cannot wash off. Your sister Carol is 19 and freshly pinned, and Carol does the math from the other end of it, the sunny end, the end where the numbers are all in your favor and the future is a wide, bright field. Carol pats your arm with a tenderness that would be unbearable if it were not so genuine, and tells you that your turn is coming, the way the healthy reassure the ill, and you love her, and you could also, some mornings, scream, because Carol cannot see the slope she is standing at the top of, and you would not tell her about it for the world. You notice the shift at parties most clearly, the way a man your own age, a perfectly nice man, will let his attention drift over your shoulder toward the cluster of younger girls by the punch bowl, the ones laughing at everything, the ones for whom the apparatus is still a game rather than a deadline. It is not cruelty. He is not even aware he is doing it. He is simply following the current, the culture laid down, the gentle, relentless downhill pull toward youth, and you are standing slightly upstream of it now, and you can feel the water tugging at your ankles. There is a grief in this that you are not permitted to name, because to name it would be to admit the brutal premise that a woman is a perishable good with a visible expiration stamped somewhere the buyers can read it. So you do not name it. You stay bright. You laugh at the right volume. You become, if anything, more pleasant as the math grows less kind, because pleasantness is the one variable you can still control, and you deploy it like a woman bailing a boat, steadily, without drama, hoping no one notices the water. And the worst of it, the part you turn over alone at night, is that the math is not wrong. It is ugly, unjust, and cruel, and it reduces you to a figure on a sliding scale, and it is also, as far as you can tell, accurate. The men drift younger, the field narrows, the years count against you in a way they will never count against Donald. You did nothing to deserve the slope. You just stand on it, as every woman before you stood on it, and at the next dance you will carry a cup of punch to a laughing 17-year-old and watch her not yet know to count. You consider, in a quiet, rebellious moment, simply supporting yourself, and then you open the newspaper to the employment section and discover that the newspaper has already decided this for you. The jobs are sorted into 2 columns, one headed Help Wanted Male and one headed Help Wanted Female, and the female column is shorter, lower paid, and leads exclusively to typing, answering phones, teaching small children, or nursing. The columns are not a suggestion, they are the architecture. You read the female column twice, looking for a door, and find a series of small rooms. You consider, in a quiet, treasonous moment, the possibility of simply taking care of yourself, of renting a place and earning your own keep, and removing the entire husband question from your immediate future, and you carry this thought to the kitchen table and open the newspaper to the employment pages to see what the world has on offer, and the world has already answered before you finished asking. The jobs are printed in 2 columns. One is headed Help Wanted Male, the other is headed Help Wanted Female. They are not suggestions and they are not accidents. They are the architecture of the thing, printed right there in the paper, the labour market sorted by sex the way a kitchen sorts the good china from the everyday, and the female column is the everyday china, shorter, plainer, and kept on the lower shelf. You read down the female column and the doors it offers are all small rooms. Typist, stenographer, telephone operator, receptionist, nurse. Teacher, in some districts, provided you remain unmarried, a condition we will get to. Salesgirl. The pay attached to these is calibrated to a precise and deliberate point, enough to support a single woman in a rented room with careful budgeting and no luxuries, and certainly no children, but never quite enough to make a husband feel optional, which is, you begin to suspect, the entire point of where the decimal sits. The male column, 2 inches to the right, is a different country. It has management in it, and training programs, and the words advancement and salary and future, and the implication, never stated, always understood, that a man's job is a road that goes somewhere while a woman's job is a waiting room with a typewriter in it. You could work the female column your whole life and retire roughly where you started, a little stiffer, no closer to a house of your own, and everyone would call you, with a pity that has teeth, a career girl. You picture it honestly, the cramped rented room, the typewriter, the budget worked out to the cent, the careful single life the female column would buy you, and it is not nothing. It has a certain stark dignity, but the newspaper has made sure it is also not enough, has engineered the numbers so that independence is technically available and practically a kind of slow privation. The columns do not forbid you a life of your own. They simply price it just out of reach, which is more effective than forbidding, because it lets everyone pretend the choice was yours. You fold the paper back up. The treasonous thought folds up with it, smaller now, filed away with the other things you have considered and set down. The newspaper has told you, in the plainest possible layout, what the culture wants you to conclude, that the smart move, the practical move, the only move the math really supports, is the husband, that the female column is a holding pen, and the exit is a wedding. You did the sum the paper laid out for you. You arrived at the answer the paper intended. You put the kettle on. A grown woman costed out of her own independence by 2 columns of small print, and you go back to waiting for Donald to call. You are 24 and you still live in the bedroom you grew up in, with the same wallpaper and the same window, because a single woman setting up her own apartment is regarded as faintly scandalous, and, given the female column in the newspaper, financially close to impossible. So you stay. You eat dinner with your parents. You hear the front door when your father comes home and the specific sigh your mother makes when another wedding invitation arrives addressed to the family. Your childhood bedroom slowly becomes evidence. Exhibit A, in a case nobody filed but everyone is trying. The wallpaper has small faded roses on it, and you have been looking at these same roses since you were 6, and there is a particular one near the window with a water stain through it that you named, privately, when you were 8, and have never told anyone about, and it is still there, and so are you. That is the sentence that runs through your head some evenings. The rose is still there. So are you. The room has not let go of you, and you have not managed to leave it. A single woman setting up her own apartment is regarded as faintly scandalous, fast, and forlorn, a woman advertising either loose morals or a failure to launch, and the female column of the newspaper has helpfully made it financially close to impossible anyway, so the two forces meet in the middle, and the answer is that you stay. You eat dinner with your parents. You hear your father's key in the door at the same minute every evening, and your mother's specific sigh when another wedding invitation arrives addressed, pointedly, to the family rather than to a couple that includes you. The room is full of evidence, and the evidence is all of childhood, frozen. The shelf still holds the dolls you have outgrown by 15 years, regarding you with the glassy, patient disappointment of a parole board that has reviewed your case and remains unmoved. The desk still has the groove where you press too hard with a pencil at 9. You are a grown woman, 24 years old, sleeping in a narrow childhood bed beneath a poster you no longer believe in, and the room has quietly become Exhibit A in a case nobody formally filed, but everyone is steadily trying, the case of why you are still here. Your mother keeps the room exactly as it was, which she means as love and which lands as a verdict, because a room preserved in childhood is a room that has decided you are not quite an adult yet, that until a man carries you over a threshold somewhere else you are, technically still a girl in her parents' house on loan between owners. You make the narrow bed every morning with hospital corners charm school would approve of, and the corners are sharp and pointless. There is a strange suspended quality to these years. The years between the childhood the room remembers and the marriage everyone is waiting for. A long-held breath of a life lived in a waiting room decorated with roses. You are not unhappy exactly. You are paused. Your sister Carol will leave this house through the front door in a white dress within the year and become, instantly, an adult with a home of her own, and you will help her into the car and come back inside and climb the stairs to the room with the roses, and the asymmetry of it will sit in your chest like a swallowed stone. You turn off the lamp. The roses go dark. In the morning they will be there again, faded and familiar, the water-stained one near the window keeping its decades-long vigil with you, and you will rise from the narrow bed and dress and go down to a breakfast where the central unspoken fact of the household is that you have not yet been claimed, and the room will wait, patient as the dolls, for the wedding that is supposed to finally let you grow up and go. There is a book, published in 1947, written by an actual psychiatrist, and the book explains in 497 confident pages that a woman like you, unmarried and possibly ambitious, is not unlucky but ill. It sold extremely well. It diagnoses your independence as a disorder, your career interest as a symptom, and your single status as a treatable condition whose cure happens to be a wedding. People quote it at dinner parties. You absorb the idea, sideways, that wanting your own life is a medical event, and you begin to wonder, against all evidence, if the doctor with the bestseller might be right. The book is called Modern Woman, The Lost Sex, and it was written by a psychiatrist named Marinia Farnham, together with a sociologist, and it came out in 1947 and promptly sold like a cure, which in a sense it was being marketed as. It runs to nearly 500 pages and costs $3.50. And inside those pages it explains, with the calm authority of medicine, that a woman like you is not unlucky or merely unmarried but ill, suffering from a disorder whose chief symptoms are independence, ambition, and the failure to find adequate fulfillment in a kitchen. People quote it at dinner parties, which is the genuinely unnerving part. A man will set down his fork and mention, apropos of your situation, that there is a doctor who has written about this, about modern women and their unhappiness, about how the ones who chase careers and education are working against their own deepest nature and paying for it with their nerves. He says it kindly, the way one passes along a diagnosis to a coughing friend. The table nods, and you sit there, having just been declared, between the roast and the pie, a clinical case. The trick of the book, the reason it works, is that it takes a cage and calls it a nature. It argues that your restlessness, your wanting, the part of you that lit up in that lecture hall and never quite went dark, is not a healthy thing being thwarted but a sick thing being expressed, that the cure is surrender, that a woman finds health only by pouring herself completely into husband and children and home and abandoning the dangerous fiction that she might want a life with her own name on it. Independence is rebranded, in 500 medical pages, as a symptom. And here is the part you do not say to anyone, the part you turn over alone at night with the lamp off. It works on you a little. You absorb it sideways, through the skin, and on the bad nights you catch yourself wondering whether the doctor might be right, whether wanting more is the disease and contentment the health you have failed to achieve. The book has found the soft place and pressed. That is the violence of it, and it is real violence, even dressed in a lab coat and bound in respectable cloth. To tell a woman that her hunger for a fuller life is a medical condition is to take away the one tool she has for understanding her own situation, which is the knowledge that the hunger is sane. Farnham did not invent the cage. She did something subtler and worse. She handed every woman in it a diagnosis to explain why she should be grateful for the bars, and she got rich doing it, and her book sat on coffee tables radiating its quiet, patient, and respectable poison. You will not read it again. You read enough. But you cannot fully unread it either, and on certain nights the sentence floats up out of the dark, the suggestion that you are not a healthy woman in an unjust system but a sick woman in a reasonable one, and you have to lie there and argue yourself back to solid ground, reminding yourself that the lecture hall lit you up for a reason, that the wanting is not a wound, that a doctor can be respectable and a bestseller and still, page after expensive page, be wrong. Every town has one, and yours is Miss Avery, who teaches 3rd grade and lives alone, and is held up, gently and constantly, as the thing you must not become. She is competent, respectable, and pitied in the same breath, often by the same person in the same sentence. In some districts, a teacher is expected to remain unmarried, so the job and the husband are arranged to be mutually exclusive, a trap with 2 exits, both marked failure. You watch the adults discuss Miss Avery in lowered voices, and you understand you are being shown a map with one road circled in warning. Every town keeps one, the way every town keeps a war memorial, a figure held up not to be honoured exactly but to be learned from. And in your town, she is Miss Avery, who teaches the 3rd grade and lives alone in a small, clean house with a cat and a garden and a piano nobody else ever hears. She is held up to you, gently and constantly, as the cautionary tale, the thing you must take pains not to become, and the lesson is delivered without a single unkind word, which is what makes it stick. The cruelty is that Miss Avery is, by any honest measure, fine. She is competent and respected, and she has shaped half the adults in this town through the 3rd grade, taught them their letters with a patience that does not run out, and she keeps a garden that wins small ribbons at the county fair. And she is pitied anyway, pitied in the same breath that praises her, so that people say what a wonderful teacher she is and then lower their voices and add the word alone, as though alone were a diagnosis, as though the ribbons and the children counted for nothing against the empty chair at her table. In some districts, the cruelty is made official, written right into the contract, because a school teacher is expected to remain unmarried, the job and the husband arranged by rule to be mutually exclusive. So a woman like Miss Avery is handed a trap with 2 exits and both of them marked failure: marry and lose the work she is good at, or keep the work and be quietly filed for the rest of her life under the heading of women something went wrong for. She chose the classroom. The town has never forgiven her the choice it forced on her. You watch the adults discuss her at the edges of dinners in the low confidential register reserved for the unfortunate, and you understand with a cold clarity that you are being shown a map. Here, the conversation says, is the other road, the one that does not end in a wedding, and look where it goes. They mean it as a warning. The warning lands. You file Miss Avery away in the frightened part of yourself as the picture of the thing waiting at the end of the road you are trying not to walk. But you have actually met Miss Avery, spoken to her, and the woman herself does not match the warning. She asked you once, at the lending library, what you were reading, and she listened to the whole answer with a sharp, warm attention you do not get from the married women your own age who are tired in a different way. She seemed, in that moment, not a cautionary tale but a person, whole and curious and at home in her own life, which is the one possibility the town has decided not to allow. You do not know what to do with that, so mostly you do nothing with it. You let her stay a warning, because the alternative is to wonder whether the road everyone is herding you down is the only good one, a dangerous thing to wonder with the fall coming. But the memory sits there, the woman at the library with the warm, sharp attention, a small, stubborn footnote to the cautionary tale, quietly insisting that the picture you have been shown is missing something the town could not bear to draw. On Sunday, the pressure arrives wearing vestments. The sermon is officially about something scriptural, but it roots, as these things do, toward the theme that a woman's highest calling is the home, the husband, and the children, in roughly that order of urgency. The pastor does not name you. He does not have to. You sit in the pew doing the arithmetic again. 24, 25 in the fall, while a stained glass window throws coloured light across your folded hands and a moral framework settles over your shoulders like a coat one size too tight. On Sunday, the pressure puts on vestments and climbs into a pulpit. The sermon is officially about a passage of Scripture, something about vines or talents or lamps, but it roots, the way these things reliably root, toward the great central theme that a woman's highest and holiest calling is the home, the husband, and the children, arranged in roughly that order of urgency, with the home doing the heavy lifting and the personal salvation tucked in somewhere near the back. Reverend Tisdale delivers it from on high, a kind, broad-faced man who has buried and married half the county. And he does not look at you when he speaks of the godly woman who keeps the hearth. He does not need to, because the pew does the work for him. The congregation arranged in family units, with you seated among your parents like a daughter still, a grown woman filed under her father's household because she has not yet been transferred to a husband's. Tisdale spreads his hands. The light comes down. The message settles over your shoulders like a coat one size too small. The stained glass throws coloured lozenges of light across your folded hands, ruby and gold sliding over your bare left finger, and you do the arithmetic again right there in the pew. Because the arithmetic does not observe the Sabbath, 24 now, 25 in the fall, and the sermon seems to know it, seems pitched directly at the soft, frightened, and sleepless place the morning math lives in. The church has weight, the magazines do not. The magazines only threaten you with spinsterhood. The church quietly suggests that your unmarried state is not just a social failure but a spiritual one, a calling refused, a lamp left unlit. You sing the hymn. You bow your head at the right moments, and underneath the practiced motions a disloyal thought keeps surfacing, which is that you did not refuse any calling, that you have been trying with everything you have to answer this particular one, that you have ironed phantom shirts and balanced phantom budgets and worn the ring and waited by the phone, and the husband has simply not arrived, and it seems hard to be told from a pulpit that the hold-up is a flaw in your soul rather than a shortage in the supply. After the service, Reverend Tisdale stands at the door and shakes every hand, and when he takes yours, he holds it a moment and says he hopes to see you settled soon, warmly, meaning only kindness, and there it is again, the word settled, the same word your mother uses, the word that turns your entire unresolved life into a thing that needs putting right, like a debt or a bill or a picture hanging crooked on a wall. You thank him. You mean it, mostly. He is not the enemy. There is no enemy. That is the whole trouble. You walk home in your good shoes with the sermon still on your shoulders, the coat one size too small, and the coloured light fading from your memory of your own folded hands, and you carry the particular heaviness the church adds to the week, which is not threat but something gentler and harder to fight, the suggestion delivered from a great height that the life you cannot seem to reach is not just expected of you by the town but required of you by God, and that your empty finger is a matter, now, between you and the lamps. You are at a wedding, but not your own, which by your age is starting to feel like a recurring genre of event you keep getting cast in as the same supporting character. You are seated, with quiet precision, at the table that holds the other unmarried women, the cousins and the friends who have also not yet been claimed. Someone announces the bouquet toss. Heads turn toward you with a hopefulness that is its own small humiliation. You are expected to lunge for a handful of flowers as though catching them were a binding legal contract with the future. You are at a wedding, but not your own, which by now is starting to feel like a recurring genre of event you keep being cast in, always in the same supporting role, the friend, the cousin, the bridesmaid in a dress chosen to flatter the bride by comparison. You have a collection of these dresses now, in colours with names like Dusty Rose and Seafoam, each one worn once to celebrate someone else crossing the line ahead of you, hanging in your closet like a row of small pastel surrenders. The seating is where the real message lives. You are placed, with a precision that cannot be accidental, at the table near the back that holds the other unmarried women, the unattached cousins and the leftover friends, a little archipelago of the unclaimed positioned at a polite distance from the family tables where the married sit with their husbands and their settled faces. The table even has a quality to it, a slightly brittle gaiety, 6 or 7 women being very lively together in the spot the seating chart reserved for women in your situation. Then comes the bouquet toss, the ritual designed expressly to sort you in public. The bride gathers the single women onto the floor, and there is no graceful way to decline. Declining is its own loud statement. So you go, you stand in the little crowd of hopefuls, and the room turns to watch with a dreadful, encouraging, and expectant fondness. And you understand that you are about to be asked to physically lunge for a handful of flowers, as though catching them were a binding contract with your own future. The flowers go up. They hang for a moment against the ceiling, turning, and the women around you tense, and some part of you, some treacherous reflex the culture installed years ago, actually wants to catch them, actually leans, and you hate that lean more than you hate almost anything, because it means the ritual has reached all the way down into you and found a hand that still reaches. The bouquet comes down. A 19-year-old named Patsy snatches it out of the air with both hands in a shriek, and the room roars, and Patsy holds the flowers aloft like a trophy, and her whole bright future glitters out in front of her, uncomplicated, on schedule. You clap. You clap with everyone, you arrange your face into delight, you tell Patsy she is next, and you watch her believe it. The easy way, a 19-year-old believes good news, and you mean the congratulations, and you also feel the private weight settle, the reminder, public and floral and impossible to argue with, that you reached and missed again, that the flowers found younger hands, that the room watched it happen and will remember, kindly, which is worse. You go back to the archipelago table and sit down among the other unclaimed women, and someone refills your glass, and the band starts up, and the married couples take the floor, and you watch them turn under the lights, and you sit in the seat, the chart reserved for you, and perform the steady, cheerful endurance the occasion demands. It is a lovely wedding. You are genuinely happy for the bride, and you will go home tonight to the narrow bed and the rose wallpaper and hang the seafoam dress beside the dusty rose one more pastel surrender in the closet, and lie there counting into the dark. There is a rule about sex, and the rule is that it does not happen until marriage, and the rule is broken constantly, but it is only ever broken at the woman's expense. A young man who strays is gaining experience. A young woman who strays is gambling her entire future on a secret, because if she becomes pregnant, she will be quietly removed from school and sent to a distant relative or a home for so-called wayward girls to have the baby in secrecy. The same act builds one reputation and ends another, and everyone knows which is which. The rule is delivered everywhere and explained nowhere, absorbed the way you absorb the idea that the stove is hot, and the rule is simply that good girls wait. You wait until marriage, and the waiting is presented as a gift you are keeping for a husband, a sealed jar of yourself to be handed over intact on a wedding night, and the value of the jar, you are given to understand, drops to zero the moment the seal is broken early. What no one mentions, in the polite version, is that the rule is broken constantly, quietly, in parked cars and on porches and in the long unsupervised spaces between curfews, by the same people who recite it on Sundays. The rule is not really about behavior. The rule is about who pays when the behavior is discovered, and the bill, every single time, is itemized in only one name, and the name is always the girl's. A young man who strays is gaining experience, sowing oats, being a boy, and the phrases that describe him are warm, forgiving, and faintly proud. A young woman who strays is gambling her entire future on a secret, because the consequence she carries is one he cannot, and if that consequence arrives, the machinery moves with a speed and a coldness that takes your breath, the quiet phone calls, the suitcase packed in an afternoon, the official story assembled for the neighbours before the car has even left the drive. You think of Dorothy. Everyone said Dorothy moved to the city, took a position there, stopped writing because city life is busy, and the town repeated this so smoothly that you almost believed it, until you were old enough to do the arithmetic on the timing and understand that Dorothy did not move to the city. Dorothy was sent away, to a relative or a home for so-called wayward girls, to have a baby in secret, and surrender it and come back, eventually, hollowed and quiet or not come back at all. The city was a kindness, the town told itself. The horror of it is not loud. That is what makes it sit so heavily. The town recognizes exactly two distinct categories of girl, and a single mistake slides you from the first into the second. There is no villain in a cape, only a smooth, efficient consensus that a girl in trouble is a problem to be relocated, a stain to be sponged out of the family record, and the same neighbours who would weep at her wedding will, at the first whisper of trouble, lower their eyes and agree it is very sad, and change the subject to the weather, which has, mercifully, no reputation to lose. So you carry the rule like a live wire, aware every moment that the boy beside you risks an anecdote and you risk an exile, that the same act writes one story as a charming chapter and the other as a vanishing, and that the difference between the two is not morality but biology, and a town that has decided whose life is disposable. You keep the jar sealed, not always out of conviction, often out of pure cold calculation, because you have seen where the other road leads, and it leads to a smooth, false story about a city and a name the town learns very quickly how to stop saying out loud. Once you are going steady, the project shifts from finding a man to converting him, on a schedule, from a boyfriend into a fiancé before the relevant birthday. This is delicate work. You cannot ask. Asking is forbidden. Asking is desperate. Asking detonates the entire arrangement. So you manage instead, with hints calibrated like a chemist measuring a reagent, with mentions of other couples, with a careful and deniable visibility of your own hope chest. You are running a campaign you are not allowed to admit is a campaign, toward an outcome you are not allowed to request. Once you are pinned, the project quietly changes shape. It is no longer about finding a man. That part is handled, Donald is secured. Now it is about conversion, about moving Donald along a track from boyfriend to fiancé on a schedule that beats the birthday, and the maddening rule of the operation is that you are forbidden from steering it openly, forbidden from asking, forbidden from so much as appearing to want the thing you have organized your entire life around wanting. So you manage instead, and the managing is an art form practiced under a gag order. You cannot say, marry me. You cannot say when. You can only arrange the conditions, set the stage, leave the right props in the right light, and hope Donald arrives at the conclusion believing it was his idea all along, which is the only way the era permits a proposal to occur, as a thing a man spontaneously thinks of while a woman pretends to be surprised. It is improvisational theatre in which only one actor has read the script, and she is also running the lights. The tools are indirect, and you have grown skilled with all of them. You mention, lightly, that your cousin Eleanor and her husband just put money down on a little house, and you let the sentence sit there radiating possibility. You make sure Donald glimpses the hope chest once, casually, the lid open, the linen stacked, an entire furnished future visible for exactly as long as it takes to register, and not 1 second longer. You are a set designer for a play the leading man does not know he is auditioning for. The hints must be calibrated like a chemist measuring a volatile reagent, because too little does nothing and too much is fatal. A woman who pushes is desperate, and desperate is the one thing that can still detonate a nearly certain engagement. So you walk a line finer than any charm school taught, applying a pressure so gentle it cannot be detected as pressure, steering a man toward a decision while maintaining, at every moment, the fiction that you have no preference about the outcome of your own life. It is exhausting in a way you cannot describe to anyone, because describing it would itself be a violation, an admission that there is a campaign, and the campaign's first rule is that it does not exist. Donald thinks the two of you are simply, pleasantly, going along. Donald does not know about the birthday, the cousin Eleanor sentence deployed with such care, the open lid of the chest. Donald gets to experience this as romance. You experience it as a delicate, deniable and ceaseless act of management dressed up as just letting things happen. And the cruelest part is the self-erasure it requires, because to run this campaign well you must perform indifference so convincingly that you half-talk yourself into it, must bury the wanting so deep that even you lose sight of it some days. And a woman who has spent 2 years pretending not to want the proposal can arrive at the proposal itself strangely numb, having anesthetized the very longing the whole operation was built to satisfy. You manage Donald gently toward the question. You are not allowed to ask it. You are barely allowed, anymore, to admit that you would like to hear it, and so you wait, steering in silence, for a man to decide to want what you have wanted out loud to no one. Because you are 24 and unattached, you have become a small, ongoing mystery that the neighborhood feels entitled to solve aloud. The speculation runs in a predictable direction, and the direction is unflattering. She is too picky. She is too plain. She is too smart, which is somehow worse than plain. She must be waiting for something that is not coming. You overhear fragments of this at the grocery, in the pew, over fences, a community quietly assembling a theory of your defect, and you are expected to keep smiling through it as though you cannot hear the verdict being drafted. You have become, somewhere around your 24th year, an ongoing mystery the neighborhood feels fully entitled to solve aloud. A puzzle set out on every porch and discussed over every back fence, the case of the unclaimed girl and what exactly is the matter with her. Because something must be the matter. That is the unshakable premise. A woman does not simply remain unmarried at your age by circumstance or rotten luck. There is a flaw. The only open question is its precise nature. The theories circulate, and they are unkind in a smiling way. She is too picky, says one camp, holding out for something that does not exist, turning up her nose at perfectly good men. She is too plain, says another, more bluntly, when they think you are not in earshot. She is too smart, says a third, and this one is delivered almost as an accusation, because a clever woman is understood to be a woman who thinks too much of herself, and thinking too much of yourself is, for a woman, a form of poor maintenance, missus. Pruitt, naturally, is a leading contributor to the file, supplementing her telephone intelligence with porch-level analysis, and her great rival in the field is your mother's friend Gladys, who favours the too picky theory and advances it at every coffee with the persistence of a woman defending a thesis. Between the two of them, they keep your case under continuous review, updating the record with each passing season you fail to produce a fiancé, a standing committee of two that never adjourns. They have no gavel, only a percolator, which is enough. You overhear it in fragments, which is the worst way to receive it. A clause at the grocery, a phrase carried on the wind over a fence, your own name surfacing in a lowered voice and then submerging again before you can catch the verb. You assemble these fragments, against your will, into a rough portrait of how the town sees you, and the portrait is of a woman with a defect, location unknown, a flaw so subtle that even the experts cannot agree on it, but so certain that no one doubts it is there. And you are expected, through all of it, to keep smiling, to move through the same grocery and the same church and the same back-fence society wearing a calm, pleasant and untroubled face, as though you cannot hear the verdict being continuously drafted and redrafted around you, as though the speculation were weather rather than knives. To flinch would be to confirm it. To object would be to seem bitter, which is simply another entry for the file, another symptom of the underlying defect. So you smile. You ask after Gladys's bursitis. You hand Mrs. Pruitt her mail when it lands in your box, pleasantly, and you do not let your face do anything at all. The genuine cruelty is not any single theory, it is the premise underneath all of them, the bedrock certainty that the flaw is in you and not in a world that priced your independence out of reach and pointed every spare man at someone younger. The town will not consider that. So you weigh 2 tomatoes in your palm at the market and hand the grocer your exact change, and smile, and carry the one thing you are never allowed to say out loud, which is that there may be nothing wrong with you at all. You write a letter, because there is now somewhere to write to. The advice columns have arrived, syndicated and confident, and women like you fill them with the same anxious question phrased 100 ways. You have been going steady for 2 years and he has not proposed. Is something wrong with him? Is something wrong with you? How long is a woman supposed to wait before the waiting itself becomes the problem? You seal the envelope, you do not sign your real name, you sign it worried in Wisconsin, and you mail your private deadline to a stranger in a newspaper. There is, at last, somewhere to write, because the advice columns have arrived, syndicated into hundreds of papers and dispensing counsel with a brisk, breezy and certain confidence that feels, on a lonely Tuesday, almost like a friend. 2 of them dominate, written by a pair of sisters who took up rival columns within a year of each other in the mid-1950s, and between them they field a daily flood of the exact anxiety that lives in your chest, the woman's question, asked 1,000 ways, of whether the thing she is waiting for is ever going to come. You read the column every morning the way you used to read the funnies, except this is not funny. This is a window into a national waiting room full of women in precisely your position, all of them writing in about men who will not commit, men who go steady for years and never produce a ring, men who are perfectly pleasant and perfectly stuck, and the columnist answers each one with the same bracing practicality, sometimes telling the writer to be patient and sometimes telling her, startlingly, to cut him loose, a permission no one in your actual life has ever offered. Tonight you do the thing you have only ever watched others do. You take out paper and you write a letter, and the act of writing it down, of putting the private tally into actual sentences, is so unfamiliar that your hand feels strange doing it. You have been going steady with Donald for 2 years. He is pinned to you which is nearly engaged, which is not engaged. He is not asked. You do not know whether the hold-up is in him or in you, and you are 24, and the birthday is in the fall, and you would like, you write, to know how long a woman is supposed to wait before the waiting itself becomes the problem. You read it back and it sounds, on the page, both smaller and worse than it feels in your head, a whole life's central dilemma reduced to a tidy paragraph that could belong to any of 10,000 women, which is, you realize, exactly the point, exactly the comfort, that you are not a freak case but a common one, common enough to be answered in a newspaper between a recipe and the bridge column. You do not sign your real name. No one does. You sign it the way the column requires, with a little invented identity that protects you while it confesses you, and you write, at the bottom, worried in Wisconsin, and the alias makes you feel briefly like a character in a story rather than a woman alone at a kitchen table, which is its own mercy. You fold the letter. You address the envelope. You find a stamp. Whether they ever print it, you will never know, and it does not entirely matter, because the relief was in the writing, in the rare permission to state the problem plainly to someone whose job is to take it seriously, rather than to fix you or marry you off or add you to a file. You mail it the next morning on your way to the grocery, dropping your private deadline into a public box, addressed to a stranger in a newspaper, and you walk on feeling lighter by exactly the weight of one confessed worry, which is not much, but is, this week, something. The movies do not help, and neither do the magazines that cover the movies, because they are full of beautiful women marrying young and publicly on a schedule that makes yours look negligent. Elizabeth Taylor married at 18. Debbie Reynolds married at 23 in front of a wall of photographers. Even Grace Kelly, who cut it close at 26, married an actual prince, which the culture treats less as romance than as a daring last-minute rescue. You are being measured, silently, against women with studios behind them, and the comparison is filed under your name without your consent. The movies do not help, and the magazines that cover the movies help even less, because together they form a glossy, relentless, and merciless gallery of women marrying young and beautifully, and on a schedule that makes your own timeline look like negligence. Carol brings the magazines home and reads them on the porch with a devotion she never showed a schoolbook, and over her shoulder you absorb the parade of weddings, each one photographed in soft light, each one starring a girl younger than you wearing a ring the size of a county. Elizabeth Taylor married at 18, you read, in a gown the studio paid for, in a wedding the studio staged like a premiere. And never mind that the marriage came apart in under a year. The image had already done its work, 18 and radiant and claimed. Debbie Reynolds married at 23 before a wall of photographers, America's sweetheart sealing the deal right on cue. Even Grace Kelly, who cut it genuinely close at 26, who must have heard the same clock you hear, redeemed the delay spectacularly by marrying an actual prince, the culture filing it not as a near miss but as the ultimate last-minute rescue, a woman snatched from the very brink of spinsterhood by a man with a country. You know these are not real, exactly, that the soft light and the studio gowns and the staged premieres bear about as much resemblance to your own life as a billboard bears to breakfast. You know it. It does not help. The images get in anyway, under the skin, where all of it gets in, and they recalibrate the standard upward, so that 24 and unproposed begins to feel not merely behind, but conspicuously, photogenically behind, lapped by teenagers in tulle. Carol sighs over a picture of a honeymoon in Acapulco and says, dreamily, that she hopes Hal takes her somewhere like that, and she does not mean anything by it. She is 19 and pinned, and the whole bright machine is working perfectly for her. But the sentence lands in you like a small stone, because Carol will get her Acapulco on schedule, while you are sitting on a porch at 24 being measured silently against a movie star who married a prince. The measuring is the injury, and no one is even doing it on purpose. The magazines do not name you. Carol does not compare you to anyone. But the comparison files itself, automatically, under your name, the way the diamond appraisal files itself, the way all of it files itself. A culture so saturated with images of the young and the claimed that a woman of 24 cannot open a magazine on a porch without being quietly told, in soft focus, how far behind the beautiful people she has managed to fall. You hand the magazine back to Carol and you look out at the yard, the ordinary unphotographed yard with its one tree and its clothesline, and you remind yourself that no one actually lives in soft light, that Elizabeth Taylor's 18-year-old marriage detonated in months, that the images are advertisements for a product called timeliness that the studios are selling and you are buying with your own peace of mind. It steadies you a little. Not much. The next magazine will arrive next week, with the next radiant girl and the next enormous ring, and you will absorb that one too, over Carol's shoulder, on the porch, in the ordinary light, behind schedule. You are permitted to have skills, even encouraged, but only on the explicit understanding that they are insurance and not ambition. The phrase is something to fall back on, and it does enormous quiet work. Your typing, your teaching certificate, your half-finished degree, all of it is framed not as a life but as a fallback, the spare tire of a vehicle whose actual engine is a husband. You may learn shorthand. You may not prefer it. The moment your fallback starts to look like a first choice, the adults in your life grow visibly, audibly concerned for your well-being. You are permitted skills, even encouraged to have a few, but only under a strict and unspoken condition, which is that they remain insurance and never curdle into ambition. The phrase that polices this is something to fall back on, 4 soft words that do an enormous amount of quiet work, and they are applied to your typing and your teaching certificate and your half-finished degree like a label that reads, in effect, break glass only in emergency. The logic is generous on its face and a cage underneath. A sensible girl, the thinking goes, should be able to support herself if something goes wrong, if the husband dies or drinks or simply never materializes. And so a modest competence is encouraged. Shorthand, bookkeeping, the nursing diploma, a way to keep the lights on should the main plan fail. But the moment that competence starts to look like a preference rather than a precaution, the moment your fallback begins to resemble a first choice, The adults around you grow visibly, audibly concerned for your well-being. You see it happen to yourself in small ways. You take a job typing for a mister. Halloran at an insurance office downtown, and you turn out to be good at it, genuinely good, fast, accurate, and quietly pleased to be earning your own dollars. And Mr. Halloran, who is kind, pats the back of your chair one afternoon and says it is a shame you will be leaving it all behind for a family someday, meaning it as a compliment, meaning you are clearly wife material, and you smile and say, yes, a shame, while a small private part of you notes that you do not, in fact, find it a shame at all. That part of you is the dangerous part, the part the arrangement is designed to keep small, because a woman who likes her work, who would choose it, is a woman doing the unforgivable thing of preferring her own company to the destiny assigned her. So you learn to talk about the job, the approved way, as a temporary thing, a nice little position, until, always until, the word that hangs the future on a man who has not arrived. You may earn. You may not want to earn. The wanting is the violation. The strangest hours are the ones at the typewriter when you forget to perform the until, when the office is quiet and the keys are clicking like a small, loyal animal that does what you ask and asks nothing back, and you are simply good at a thing and content in it, and for a stretch of minutes, the apparatus of husbands and deadlines and arithmetic falls away and there is just the work and your own steady hands doing it well. Those minutes feel like freedom. They also feel like contraband, a thing you are getting away with, a small theft of a life that was supposed to be spent waiting. Then 5 o'clock comes, and Mr. Halloran wishes you good night, and you cover the typewriter and walk home to the rose wallpaper, and the until reattaches itself to everything, and the competence shrinks back down into a fallback, a spare tire, a thing you keep in the trunk, in case the marriage you are supposed to be steering toward breaks down on the road. You are good at the job. You are not allowed to let that matter. You fold the wanting up small and put it away, and you go home, and you wait. The culture has a whole inventory of small ceremonies designed to sort the women into married and not yet, and you are forever being volunteered for the not yet pile in public. You catch the bouquet, or worse, you visibly fail to. You are seated at the singles table. You are asked, by a relative who means well and lands hard, whether you have anyone special, in a tone that already knows the answer. Each ritual is a tiny public referendum on your status, conducted with cake nearby, and you are required to perform good cheer through every single one. The culture keeps an inventory of small ceremonies whose hidden function is to sort the women into two piles, married and not yet, and you are forever being volunteered, in public, for the not yet pile. They do not feel like sorting at the time. They feel like fun, like tradition, like harmless party business, which is precisely how they get away with conducting a continuous census of your romantic standing in front of everyone you know. There is the bouquet, which you have already learned to dread, the floral lottery that drags every unmarried woman onto the floor to lunge in public. There is the seating, the soft engineering that lands you, event after event, at the table reserved for the unattached. And there is the question, the great recurring question, deployed by relatives who mean well and land hard, the gentle inquiry into whether you have anyone special, asked in a tone that has already read the answer off your bare left hand and is simply confirming it for the record. Your great-aunt Florence is the reigning champion of the question, cornering you at every gathering with a hand on your forearm and a face arranged into tender concern, leaning in close enough that you can smell the violet pastilles she favours, and asking, every single time, whether there is anyone special yet, with an emphasis on the yet that turns the sentence into a soft accusation. You say you are seeing someone. She says, "Oh, but is it serious?" And the word serious sits there, meaning ring, meaning date, meaning when will you stop being a problem we have to ask about. Each of these rituals is a tiny public referendum, and you are required not merely to endure them but to perform good cheer throughout, to catch or miss the flowers gracefully, to take your seat at the singles table without visible reaction, to answer Florence's yet with a bright, calm and untroubled smile while she pats your arm in sympathy you did not request. The performance is mandatory. A flat answer, a flinch, a flicker of the real fatigue would spoil the party and confirm the defect, so you give them the cheer every time, cake nearby, the room half watching. What gets you is the relentlessness, the way there is no event safe from it, no wedding or shower or christening or holiday dinner, that does not contain at least one mechanism for gently reminding you and everyone present of exactly where you stand. You cannot attend a celebration of someone else's married life without being processed, somewhere in the proceedings, through a small machine designed to register that you have not yet joined them, and the machine runs on cake and good cheer and great aunts in violet pastilles, which is what makes it impossible to object to. So you go to the parties, and you catch the flowers or you do not, and you take the seat the chart assigns, and you tell Florence yes you are seeing someone and yes it might be serious, and you smile through the gentle public audit of your status, and you go home afterward and take off the good shoes and sit on the edge of the narrow bed and feel the particular tiredness that comes from a full day of performing cheer about the one subject that frightens you most. The rituals will reset by the next gathering, so will you. There is always another party, and another machine, and another bright, required smile. And then it arrives, the actual day, the 25th birthday you have been counting towards since you were old enough to count. There is cake. There are candles, an alarming number of them now, enough to require strategy. People are kind, which is somehow the worst part, because their kindness has a careful quality to it, the gentleness you extend to someone standing near an edge. You make a wish. Everyone in the room knows the wish. You blow out the candles in one go, because failing to would be, on this particular day, simply too much symbolism to survive. And then it arrives, the actual day, the one you have been counting toward since you were old enough to count, and the strangest thing about the 25th birthday is how ordinary the morning is. The same rose wallpaper, the same brass alarm clock, the same arithmetic. Except the arithmetic has now reached its appointment. The number you have been walking toward for years finally standing in the room with you, wearing a party hat. Your mother makes the cake, your favourite, and the kitchen smells of vanilla and butter all afternoon, and there is a tenderness in how she frosts it that nearly undoes you. Because she is not saying anything today, she has declared a ceasefire for the occasion, and a mother who has stopped mentioning Patricia is a mother who has decided the day is hard enough already. Carol hangs a paper streamer with great enthusiasm and no irony, and Donald is coming for dinner, and the family is performing, with real love, a celebration of the very birthday everyone in the room privately regards as a deadline. The candles are the problem. There are 25 of them now, enough that lighting them takes strategy and a second match, enough that the cake glows like a small, bright, and controlled fire, and the heat of it reaches your face when you lean in, and you understand, looking at that bristling field of flame, that the candles have become a kind of counter, a tally of the years displayed in wax, the deadline itself rendered edible and set before you to blow out. People are kind, and the kindness is the worst part, because it has a careful quality, the particular gentleness you extend to someone standing near an edge. Everyone's voice is a half-tone softer, everyone's good wishes weighted with a sympathy that no one would offer a girl turning 20, they sing. Donald's hand finds your shoulder during the song and squeezes, once, and you feel the warmth of it, and also the absence of the question his hand has still not asked, both at the same time, the comfort and the lack arriving together the way they always do now. You lean toward the cake to make the wish, and of course everyone in the room knows the wish. It is the least secret wish in the history of birthday candles, and the knowing hangs over the table as you draw the breath, the whole family silently wishing the same wish on your behalf, a room full of people hoping that by the next cake there will be a ring, that the field of candles will have done its work, that 25 was the deadline met, and not the deadline missed. You hold the breath a moment. You make the wish anyway, the obvious one, because what else is there to wish? You blow out all 25 in one go, because failing to, on this particular day, with this particular audience, would be simply too much symbolism to survive, and the smoke rises, and the family cheers, and the lights come back up, and the cake gets cut, and it is, by every visible measure, a lovely birthday. And underneath the candle smoke and the vanilla and Donald's warm, unasking hand, the number has arrived, quietly, fully, the one you have walked toward your whole life, and it sits at the table now like a guest who is not leaving. 25, here at last, in wax and frosting, and the careful softness of everyone you love. Here is the strange part, the part you only half understand while you are living inside it. There is no law. Nothing in any statute book expires on your birthday. No official anywhere has stamped a date on your forehead. The deadline of 25 was never written down, which is exactly the secret of how completely it runs your life. Because a rule that no one wrote is a rule no one can be argued out of. You stand in your old bedroom, 25 now, and you look for the authority that did this, and you cannot find a single fingerprint. Here is the part you only half understand while you are standing inside it, the part that surfaces late on the night after the birthday, when the cake is wrapped and the streamers are down and the house is quiet and you are alone in the room with the roses. There is no law. You go looking for the statute, the rule, the official somewhere that decreed 25, and there is nothing there. No book, no signature, no office that issued the deadline you have organized your life around. Nothing in any law expires on your birthday. No clerk anywhere stamped a date on your future. No court will hear the case of a woman unmarried at 25, because there is no case, there is no charge, there is no statute you have broken, and yet you have spent years walking toward this day as though toward a sentence, as though a verdict waited in a room with your name on the docket. You arrive. The room is empty. There is no judge. There never was. That is the genuine horror of it. Quieter, deeper, and stranger than any single sermon or magazine or aunt. The realization that the most powerful rule in your entire life was never written down by anyone, and that this is precisely the source of its power. A written rule can be read, argued, amended, repealed. A written rule has an author you can find, and a logic you can contest, but the deadline of 25 has no author. It was enforced by everyone and owned by no one, and you cannot argue your way out of a rule that no single person ever admits to having made. You think of all of them, your mother at the stove and Reverend Tisdale at the door and Mrs. Pruitt on the line, and the doctor with his bestseller, and the newspaper with its 2 columns, and the magazine with its 129 ways, and not one of them is the source. Every one of them is only passing along a pressure they received from somewhere else, each a single hand on a rope, and you look for the hand at the other end, and there is no end. The rope simply disappears into the culture, anonymous, fingerprintless, everywhere. And the strangest discovery, sitting there in the dark with the roses you have known since you were 6, is that the clock keeps running even now that you have seen it has no face. You know it is arbitrary. You know there is no law. You have looked directly at the empty room where the judge was supposed to be, and still, tomorrow, you will rise and do the arithmetic, 25 now, and feel the old pull, because a rule does not need a fingerprint to move you. It only needs everyone, and everyone is still here, still passing the pressure along, still counting. So you sit a while longer in the quiet, a woman of 25, holding the small, terrible freedom of having found out that the wall you have been walking toward your whole life was painted on the air, that you could, in theory, walk straight through it. The roses keep their vigil. And you reach over and turn the brass alarm clock to face the wall, the way you hush a guest who has talked long enough. You do not wind it. For one night, you let the morning find you on its own. So that was your night inside the countdown. You did arithmetic before coffee, ironed a shirt for a husband who did not exist, balanced an imaginary salary, and wound a class ring with Angora yarn so it would fit. You consulted a magazine for 129 ways to land a man, considered the lasso option, and decided, sensibly, to get a dog. You sat at the back table at 3 different weddings, dodged a doctor who declared you ill, and blew out 25 candles in a single heroic breath. And underneath the comedy of it, there were real young women who lived this, who did the morning math for years, who filled cedar chests with linens they were not allowed to use, and waited by hallway telephones for a call that meant their week had a shape. They were not foolish. They were reading the only map they were handed, on a street where every signpost pointed the same direction, and most of them walked it with more grace than the map deserved. The strange thing is how recent it all was, and how completely it has faded. The word spinster has gone soft and antique. The 2 columns in the newspaper are gone. The deadline that ruled a generation turned out, in the end, to have been written by no one at all, and so, quietly, it let go. Thank you for spending this stretch of the night here with me. There is nothing left for you to count tonight. No birthday approaching, no ring to wait for, no aunt at the door. So let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Let the blanket settle. Let the whole long arithmetic of other people's expectations go quiet, and feel how heavy your eyes have become, how warm the dark is, how little any clock can ask of you now. You have nowhere to be and no one to become. Sleep well.